So, Eric, should I buy Bitcoin now?
Yes, it's either that or Vow or probably both.
Does it matter what price the Vow or the Bitcoin has?
Yeah, actually, it doesn't, because when you buy either of these two assets, you're not buying them as a trade. I don't recommend anyone to trade, right? Trading implies that you can somehow guess the future, and no one can guess the future, and it's just a good way to lose a lot of money. So what you need to do is you need to buy the fundamentals. And Bitcoin has very clear fundamentals, as does Vow. Bitcoin at present has the advantage that it has much greater adoption, and it's very solid and very liquid, and it's the big elephant in the room. Vow is Bitcoin 2.0 in my book, and if you didn't buy, Bitcoin when it was $1, then you have that opportunity in Vow.
How do you see the future demand of Bitcoin in Vow?
I think both will increase substantially. I think Bitcoin will establish greater dominance. So there's a concept of dominance where if you look at the total market cap of the crypto world, all the shitcoins that exist and Ethereum and all this other stuff, and Bitcoin, the ratio of the Bitcoin market capitalization to the rest of it gives you an index that we call dominance. And it has traditionally been above 50%, right? It's still above, I don't actually know what the number is at this point, but it means that, more than half of all the money in the crypto space is in Bitcoin. So I think actually that number will increase across time because there is a question of patience. There are a lot of people who put money into all these projects that ultimately haven't gone anywhere. And they've held on with the thought that when Bitcoin rises, everything else rises, and then they're going to dump those positions. But Bitcoin has these long winters, and people just lose patience. At some point, they just dump whatever positions they have, and then they go, well, now what do I do with this money? And the answer is they buy Bitcoin. As for Vow will grow as well, but will grow substantially faster than Bitcoin. For two reasons. One is it's currently small, so it's easy to grow a lot when you're small. And the second is because when all of the retailers start onboarding, that represents commercial demand. And that is just head and shoulders bigger than, it's orders of magnitude greater than the demand that Bitcoin will ever see.
I heard you once talk about Bitcoin as a better money. Is Vow the same, better money?
Yes.
What's different about both of them?
So I tried to create a meme, right? I would go on LinkedIn and Twitter and all these places, and whenever there was a discussion about Bitcoin, positive or negative, I would say Bitcoin is simply better money, right? And I put a little TM there, though it wasn't actually trademarked. Bitcoin is better money in a lot of ways, right? So there are at least three qualities to money, or three functions that it serves. One is it serves for transaction settlement. I want some product, I need to give you something in return, so I give you money, so to settle that transaction. The second is it serves as a store of value. While I'm holding on to the money, that money hopefully retains its value, right? It's a good store of value. And the third is it serves as a unit of account, which means that I think in the units of the money that I hold. If I live in Europe, I think in terms of euros. If I live in South Africa, in terms of rands or whatever, right? And so Bitcoin is not a good unit of account yet, right? And primarily because in order to be a useful unit of account, you need to really use it for transaction settlement. And Bitcoin hasn't been a good transaction settlement currency up to this point. The first aspect of it is that it can handle 7 transactions a second, right? For an entire planet, that is nothing. That means you can choke the blockchain very quickly. systems like the Lightning Network substantially relieve that problem, right? It is now possible to handle really large volumes of transactions on the Lightning Network. So Bitcoin all of a sudden can become a real transaction settlement currency. And once people start using it as in that capacity, then they'll start thinking in terms of, oh, I had to surrender X much Bitcoin for this, and today I would have had to surrender this, much lesser amount of Bitcoin. So they start thinking in Bitcoin, right? There's a number of us who already, do that, and then of course, as a store of value, Bitcoin is superb. I mean, it is just far and above, the best sort of store of value that we've created, even better than gold. Vow is even better money than Bitcoin, and it's better money because money is only as valuable as people use it, and Vow will be used much more deeply and much more broadly than Bitcoin will be ever, simply because it's really designed with that purpose in mind. When Bitcoin was invented, its impetus wasn't to become the world's global currency or a transaction settlement currency or really anything. Like, we don't actually know what the intention was, other than to solve the problem of having money on the internet, right? And we know that that was closely related to the financial shenanigans of the ruling elite, right? So we could say that Bitcoin was probably created in order to take power away from the existing power elite. But there was no plan. It was an idea that we're sort of implying or imputing onto Satoshi Nakamoto. We have actually no idea. Vow, on the other hand, is very specifically designed. Its architecture is targeted at the commercial use of money, right? It is weaved right into the fabric of commerce. And so where Bitcoin is simply better money, Vow is going to be fantastic money.
You talked about the store of value, that Bitcoin is really great for that, but making that possible, it has to be secure. So
absolutely.
Maybe you can talk a bit about the security of Bitcoin and the Vow. What's important about that to know?
So security is a concept that is directly juxtaposed with risk, and there are many different kinds of risks. So there is the risk, there's an existential risk that the Bitcoin network gets literally destroyed, right? Let's just say that the United States government, in coalition with a whole bunch of governments, decided that Bitcoin needs to just be stamped out of existence. They have the capacity, the capabilities, and they would have the power to trace every blockchain node, every Bitcoin node that is operating, figure out where it's domiciled, where it's hosted, physically show up to that address, confiscate the equipment, arrest the operators, and that way you would have a very significant damage to the network, right? Now, thankfully, we live in a world where this kind of supranational cooperation doesn't exist. So if the United States and the West decided that they wanted to destroy Bitcoin, they would really need to go get the cooperation of Russia and North Korea and Iran and this sort of other bloc of countries in the world that have across time diverged from each other and today are clearly inimical, right? They're enemies of each other. So it would be very difficult for the West to decide to shut down Bitcoin, or for that matter, for Russia to decide to shut down Bitcoin, because they would need to get if as long as there is one node on the planet operating, the Bitcoin network is still alive, right? And as a matter of fact, even let's just say that that they managed to destroy all the nodes on the Bitcoin network. if any of those nodes, and practically every one of them does this, has a backup of two things, of the software and of the blockchain, then that means that they could have their equipment confiscated and they could say, okay, now we know better. Now we know it's dangerous. So we will take proper steps. We will hide ourselves behind VPNs. We'll set up new equipment in proper facilities with proper security, and we'll bring it all back. And as soon as the first node comes back, the entire history of the blockchain is alive again, and your money is in your wallet, and you can keep moving as if nothing had happened. So Bitcoin is really indestructible, and it's to a large extent it's by design. When the internet was created by DARPA, the United States Defense Advanced Research Program Agency, right? So there's this agency that does all the cutting edge development stuff, and they were the ones who created the internet. Their explicit purpose in creating the internet was to create a communications network that would survive a nuclear event in the world. So imagine a nuclear event is a really big deal, right? It destroys tons of equipment. The EMP characteristics of it would shut down like whole parts of the world. But the question was, can we build a network, a communications network that would survive that? And that was the internet. And of course, Bitcoin is built on top of the internet. And it has its own, through the decentralization process that was invented by the Bitcoin proof of work mechanism, we then have double the security. Not only do we have like physical transport security, which is the internet, but we also have security within the internet in the decentralization of the nodes. So that's one aspect of security, is existential for the infrastructure. Another aspect is value. Could Bitcoin go to zero, right? To $0? And the answer is yes, it's possible. It would take a monumental effort. It would basically take for everyone to leave Bitcoin. And that could happen if you had a better currency. Vow is that currency. Vow is the one currency in the world right now that is simply better than Bitcoin. Do I think that people will abandon Bitcoin in favor of Vow? Yes, they will. Will they do it to the extent that Bitcoin gets completely destroyed? Probably not. I think that for a good long time, the two systems will coexist. Bitcoin will become more competitive, and maybe even the mechanisms that Vow is pioneering could be adopted by Bitcoin. But I think there's also a question of timing. I think Vow will grow so quickly that it's going to take, like, you and I are talking about this, and I'm trying to lay down the basic conceptual framework for what is really happening here. And even after I explain it, and I've explained this to so many people, they really just don't get it. It's hard, right? Now imagine that that very large numbers of people need to reach this conclusion without me having to do this. And if they did, the answer would be, well, let's just use Vow rather than trying to take Bitcoin and sort of force it into this thing that it is not.
Now you made a great comparison between Bitcoin and the Vow. I would include in this point, in this view, the fiat currencies, because most of the people getting more and more used or don't even recognize that the governments are taking away their money just by spreading out more and more dollars or more and more euro or whatever currency it is. And so I think the governments are stealing our money. Is that possible with the Vow and the Bitcoin? So what's the difference between the currencies, the normal dollar, euro currencies, and these two others?
Yeah, no, I think you put your finger on it, right? We have always had taxation, and taxation is in essence theft, right? It is a forcible, at the point of a gun, confiscation of your money. And then there's also confiscation, which there's plenty of. In the United States, for example, we have this program called civil asset forfeiture, where literally any government agency, that could be your sheriff's department, it could be the FDA, the FBI, name any one of these alphabet soup of set of organizations, any one of them can basically seize your bank account funds. They could actually take your house, they can take your car, and they don't have to even charge you with a crime. They literally take your car, hand you a receipt, say thank you very much, and then they will go sell it or do whatever they want with it, right? So we in the United States no longer have property. We have property conditional upon the US government deciding that it, for whatever reason, wants it. And I think that that's also the case, and has been the case in many countries. If people have property, it's only because no one else is interested in it. But if someone is interested, within the right levels of power, they can always take it. So this is in stark contrast to blockchain, which obviously includes Vow, because governments cannot confiscate what they don't know exists. So in California, for example, and not in Texas and not in Florida and not in many other states in the Union here, but in California, I am required to register a handgun. The state has to know that I own a handgun. Why? Because when they decide that they're going to confiscate handguns, they know exactly which houses to go to. You said you have a handgun, so give it up, right? If I have a handgun and I didn't register it, they don't know to show up, and they can't show up to every household. Say, do you have a handgun? No, I don't. Well, we don't believe you. Here, let me tear up your house, see if you buried it, put it in the shed, it's in the pond or wherever it is, right? They don't have those kinds of resources, so they rely on information, and Bitcoin denies them information. Anyone can open, create a Bitcoin wallet. It's an operation that's done locally, right? Meaning you don't need the internet to do that. And so there's no way that anyone can know that you have it. And if there's no way, then they can't confiscate. So there's another level of confiscation which has more recently come into focus, and it frankly is something so important that has received so little attention, but has these incredible ramifications, and that is the confiscation of the foreign reserves from Russia. Right? We took, I don't know, 300 billion or 600 billion, whatever amount of money, right? That money properly belongs to Russia. It is used for Russia to settle transactions across borders, to buy, products that they buy, etc. And the West all of a sudden decides, oh no, we're just going to take that. So first of all, there is no law, right? There's no body of law. There's no proper international structure for making these decisions and for creating equity between nations. So nations are not the same. They're not guaranteed the same set of rights by any organization, right? Which really means that it comes down to the gun again. What you can physically do, what you can force through your partnerships or through your resources or whatever, or through war. In my view, the confiscation of Russian reserves is a very loud signal to really the rest of the world from the G7 that says the dollar is no longer a safe option to hold. You guys better look for diversifying your reserves into some other kind of asset, because your dollars can be taken at any point in time if you are sort of politically incorrect, right? Oh, you don't support homosexuals. Well, that's it. You were just taking your reserves. Oh, you are selling bananas across to the, okay, that's it. Almost any arbitrary reason can be used. And I use the homosexual thing because that's the issue between the European Union and Hungary, right? Hungary is a very conservative country, so is Poland. and they're making a really big deal out of out of this, and they're almost pressing Hungary out of the union over this one issue. There's probably other issues as well, but it's part of it, right? But the point is, it's largely arbitrary. This is one morality versus another, and now they can actually take your money. This is confiscation, and so that causes this huge rift between two factions in the world: the G7, who and more specifically the United States, that issues the dollars, and really everybody else. And the fact that they have crossed this threshold, right? It's really a Rubicon. Has already created this reaction in the world that is ultimately going to destroy the dollar. If the dollar, the dollar as we know it today was really created at Bretton Woods. It was at that conference where the United States put itself at the center of the world's financial system. And they did so by creating a set of correspondent banks. If you want to send money from Germany to Hong Kong, you cannot do it directly. Your central bank has to have a correspondent account in New York, and Hong Kong has to have a correspondent account in New York, and then money can go from one account in New York to another account in New York. And that means that all transaction settlements, all international transaction settlements have to be done in dollars, which also means that all the prices for commodities and everything has to be quoted in dollars. That puts the US at the center of everything. Mm-hmm. And now, through the abuse of power, because that's what it is, they are really destroying that. So that just means one thing: it opens the door to crypto, because crypto is unconfiscatable, right? There isn't in crypto this incredible apparatus of control and denial, that the US has created. Sanctions, for example. France is doing business with Iran. Well, France is free to do business with Iran. It's not illegal in France to do business with Iranian companies or whatever. But the United States says, oh, but we have sanctions against it. You're violating our sanctions. And the French are like, well, so what? Right? And the answer is, oh, but you have French companies that have assets in the United States, and we will confiscate those assets, right? This is what happened to UBS. The United States government in Switzerland, the United States government went and confiscated a whole ton of property that UBS had, and UBS learned its lesson. The answer is, don't keep assets in the US because they can be confiscated, mm-hmm. Right? This is a climate that we're living in of utter hostility, and it's a climate. It's a quality of the climate, the hostility, that Bitcoin solves, blockchain solves. If I have my assets not in the United States, but on Bitcoin, or on the Bitcoin network, or on the Vow network, well, the US can have whatever sanctions it wants. I really don't care, right? They have OFAC, the Office of Foreign Asset Control, that dictates. I mean, they're even blacklisting Bitcoin addresses now, which is, again, a complete abuse of power. It's completely outside of their charter. There's a lawsuit against OFAC and against the Treasury because it's outside of statute, basically, right? But they can do whatever they want. But the thing is, in the world of crypto, we don't care, right? They can blacklist all the addresses they want. The only people who are going to enforce those prohibitions are the exchanges and all the institutions that have already bowed their head and are bent to their knees in compliance. Mm-hmm. And the rest of us, well, we can do what the fuck we want. We can do whatever we want.
Yeah, but that's the thing that's nearly incredible for the normal people listening maybe to us, because they are used to this big might behind everything, like the G7, as you mentioned it all. And it's hard to believe that this should be impossible, that they are not able to confiscate our money or our Bitcoin, our vow. However, maybe talk a bit in an easy understanding way for these people who are not able to understand this, that this is really impossible. So the money is safe.
Yeah. So I've made the point that in order to confiscate property, you have to know the existence of that property, right? You have to know that it exists and in whose hands it is, and possibly the location of it. With Bitcoin, so if you deny knowledge of that, it's really, really difficult, because it's like saying government could properly search my house, right? They can just get a judgment from a court and break my door down and tear all my shit apart. They take my cabinets apart, they break the doors, they break the walls looking for stuff in the walls. Okay, they have that capacity, but do they have that capacity at scale? Could they do that to everyone? And the answer is, well, there's a matter of resources. Could they pay for very many more enforcement officers to go and do this? And the answer is, right now we are hiring, I don't know, some 80,000 new IRS agents, right? What do IRS agents do? Well, they audit people, right? They come in and they stick their nose in your business and they look for things that you might have possibly done wrong, like, oh, you didn't save this receipt, or this receipt is faded and you took this deduction and we can't read the receipt, or whatever kind of idiocy it is that they do. And at the end of the day, you get stuck with a bill, right? The whole point of the IRS agent is to stick you with a bill. And we're just hiring this entire army of people to go screw the American public. Okay, great. They could absolutely do that with cops with guns, and they could go house to house searching for stuff, right? It would be highly unpopular, and they might actually create a civil war out of some such effort. But they could at least try. But here's the thing: if they're looking for a physical thing, like, let's say, gold, right? They could come in with metal detectors to your house and find that you buried the gold, and they could take it. Okay, yeah, you could do that. But what about Bitcoin? There is no way. Like, I can literally just memorize the private key to my account, right? So it doesn't exist anywhere in the world. Anytime that I need to access my funds, I just type in my private key into some wallet. I move my funds, I destroy the wallet, my private key is in my head. How are they going to confiscate that? Right? They don't know. You can just say, if they ask you, do you have a private key memorized? No. How are they going to say, yes, you do? Right? So how much safer can it be?
Yeah.
Bitcoin represents freedom from oppression, freedom from taxation, freedom from confiscation, freedom from control. And I speak from a perspective of having not being an American and having lived in this country for 40 something years, and having observed the way that the country has changed. Everything here now is threats. They send you these forms and you have to sign them, and under penalty of perjury. And if you don't have to sign them under penalty of perjury, they tell you in the back, if you don't do this, section so and so, we will do this too. We'll come and stomp on your head, right? Everything is threats and intimidation.
Yeah.
And I mean, it didn't used to be that way, right? It's a trend that we see, but not just in the United States. No. I mean, certainly in Europe, Europe has become largely fascist again. They're driving towards the Chinese model. The Chinese have a dictatorship, and it works really well for the Chinese. It works well for the people at the top, right? And this is what Klaus Schwab and the WEF and George Soros and Conrad Black and Peter Monk and all these kinds of people within that elite, what they're driving towards.